Let's all take a deep breath in and let it go. Another deep breath in. Let it go. Last time, inhale. And let it go. Just tapping into the heart, tapping into that space of prayer, of grace, of allowing ourselves to be filled by knowledge and by light, by devotion, by wisdom. I'll just say a little prayer, then we'll begin. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Pangam lagayate shalam mukum avartaye kritim yat kripa tamam bande Krishna Chaitanyam Ishwaram. Okay. Grateful for the opportunity to join together in Sangha and continue. We performed a miracle and we made it through chapter 2, which was amazing. Such an amazing chapter, right? With all those different sections. It's, we could just restart again from chapter 2, verse 1 and just go all over and over again. But we are moving on to chapter 3, which is Karma Yoga. And we'll try to get through, I'm not going to make any promises, but my plan is the first 16 verses or so. Krishna is basically elaborating on this topic of Karma Yoga that he introduced in chapter 2, because Arjuna is still not really clear about how to reconcile the seeming contradiction of being renounced while also working in the world, which is the kind of theme of this, what's called Nishkama Karma Yoga, which means without desire, without selfish personal desire, which means that Nishkama part, Karma Yoga, to act in the world while being renounced from that own materialistic personal desire. So he's kind of confused about how to do that. And so Krishna dedicates this whole chapter to that practice. And understanding that practice from the bhakti perspective is what Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas are doing, okay? So basically his real concern here, is it really possible to be in a state of detachment while you're asking me to fight? How can I do that? How can I do my duty, which seems so juxtaposed, so contradictory to renunciation, but you're telling me to do both? So he's kind of confused on how to do that, and Krishna's going to share. So let's read the first few verses here. Let's read the first few verses here. So Arjuna said, "O Janardhan, O Keshava," these are different names for Krishna, "why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare? You think that intelligence is better than fruitive work." So he's contrasting this intelligence, meaning the Buddhi Yoga that Krishna's already been speaking about, the yoga of intelligence and of discernment and of renunciation, is better than fruitive work, which is the karma that Krishna spoke about prior. He says, "My intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Therefore, please tell me decisively which will be most beneficial for me." So he's not really getting the point still that Karma Yoga is the synthesis, right? That here, if we have the point of work in the world, which is karma, that's the thesis. What would be the antithesis of that? It would be renunciation. But what is the synthesis of that is karma yoga, nishkama karma yoga. So he's not really seeing the full picture yet. He's just seeing the thesis and the antithesis, but he's not seeing the synthesis. Okay, so what else do we have here? Yeah. Yeah, so he is kind of also what's happening here a little bit with Arjuna is that he is using his raga and dvesha, which again is this concept of attachment and aversion. Raga meaning attachment, dvesha meaning aversion, to get his desired outcome, which is that he doesn't have to fight in this war. So he's kind of using this state of confusion and being like, oh, doesn't it seem like, I don't have to fight now because there's some contradictory things that you told me. So how is it possible I'm going to do this whole renunciation thing and follow your instruction at the same time? Is impossible. So let me be in the forest and renounce my duty and just be peaceful, and we do this in many ways as well. But what I want to say here just very briefly is that, again, this theme of raga and dvesha is brought up by the acharyas, by the great teachers in our lineage. And along with the desire for the fruit of action, right? So enjoyment is the desire for control, right? We can't have more and more enjoyment if we don't have increasing levels of control, right? So if the desire is, I want to get what I want and what is pleasurable, and I want to avoid what is unpleasurable, what helps you get that? When you feel you have more control, right? When you feel you can exert more control over the world and over others and whatever else. Okay, so you can make sure that you can get what you want. And along with the desire for control comes the desire for power. Okay. And along with the desire for power comes the idea that I am the doer. I am the agent. I'm the one doing. It's a certain egoic identity of, yes, look at all that I've done. And look, I'm the one doing. It is under my control that reality is giving me what I want. Which is also in a subtle way saying, I deserve the enjoyment. Yes, because I've done. Because I've done like this, I deserve it. So it's just this whole train, right? From a certain desire comes the desire for control. From control, we want more power. From power, we think that we are the doer and the agent of action. And from that comes the entitlement. That, yes, this is exactly what I deserve. And we become more and more disconnected from divinity because of that entitlement. Right? Doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a preference for nice things. That's always good. We shouldn't be self-hating and like, oh, I should just get the worst and I should never have any good things. But that one shouldn't feel so entitled to it. Understanding that even if you have built the biggest empire, that you should still be able to be happy sleeping on the floor with nothing. Right? Okay, so I bring this out because when we're speaking about this Buddhi yoga or this yoga of renunciation of the intelligence, you're not acting according to raga and dvesha. You're not acting according to your attachment and aversion, but you're rather acting according to higher knowledge. Right? And that's kind of, we can all have a certain intuition about that truth, that what is it that keeps us from acting and just being controlled by our desire and by our fear? It's knowledge, right? You know better. Even just from a child, we understand that knowledge can prevail over the lower impulses of attachment and aversion, right? You know better. So the knowledge of what keeps you from putting yourself into that pit, right? Into that bondage. Okay. So anyways, all these different topics are getting introduced here. Let's see. Yeah, so again, basically what's happening with Arjuna is he's understanding Buddhi Yoga to mean complete renunciation, right? He's accepting it to mean complete renunciation. There's no desire for the fruit, right? Which imagine if you get this state of Buddha Yoga, you're like telling all your friends, yes, I'm practicing Buddha Yoga. You can tell that, but how much can you live that, right? You start to tell your boss, yes, I'm practicing this new yoga. It's called Buddha Yoga. It's where there's no desire for the fruit of my actions. Okay, I'll keep your paycheck. No problem. You come to work and you work with no desire for the fruit of your labor. So there's in one sense some misunderstanding here that Arjuna still has. Okay. So let's continue. So basically this next little section here, verses 3 to 8, Krishna is going to describe what renunciation is, what real renunciation means, okay? So you can mark that if you want, that verses 3 to 8 are about renunciation. So we'll read a little bit. Krishna said, "O sinless Arjuna, I have already explained that there are two classes of men who try to realize the self. Some are inclined to understand it by empirical philosophical speculation, and others by devotional service. Not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection." Right, so he's kind of giving some clarity here. Everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. Right? It's like you trick yourself, oh, I will just think of nothing. But even that is a thought. And you're thinking, wow, my mind, then you catch the mind being, wow, my mind is so clear. Look at this. But even that is a thought. And so in the same way, they're saying there's no possibility of not acting in this world. You're always acting. You're always doing. You're always forced by nature to continue doing. Okay, so let's see what we have here. So verse 3. Verse 3, he says, I've already explained. So he's giving this juxtaposition, the two classes of men who try to realize the self. This was in chapter 2. Some are inclined to understand it by empirical philosophical speculation, and others by devotional service. Okay, so these are the earlier stages, or the earlier points made by Krishna in chapter 2. One is that Jnana Yoga that was given, which was verses 11 to 30 in chapter 2. Remember where there was kind of this distinction between matter and spirit? And he was saying, the soul cannot be burned, it's everlasting, cannot be withered by the wind, all these different things like that, kind of creating this distinction between matter and spirit, and that you are not matter, therefore you're spirit. And it kind of creates this mood of renunciation, right? That I know I am not this, so therefore I know that I am spirit, and I can renounce everything outside of me. Okay, so through the process of knowledge. And then the karma yoga process, which here he's saying as devotional service. He's saying it's bhakti, because for all intents and purposes, he's going to lay out how karma yoga and bhakti yoga are practically the same. Okay, so he's saying, there's these two types of people who try to realize the self. Those who try to go the renunciation path and try to renounce this world, and those who live in the world but are devoted, right? And so one of my gurus, he says that bhakti doesn't mean renunciation, it means dedication, right? It does not mean renunciation means dedication. So that's what he's putting out here, is that contrast. And really, when we think about these two paths, they require two very different types of people to do them. One is a renunciate path. Who here considers himself a renunciate? Okay. Semi. Okay. So he's saying that there's these two types of nishta or adhikar. I'll put this term in the chat. This adhikar really means qualification. The qualities that one needs within themselves to be able to do a certain activity. Okay. So one is this karma yoga, and the other is jnana yoga. right? Karma being in the world while spiritual, and the other one retreating to the forest and renouncing things. And the only difference really between the two is the lifestyle, right? The lifestyle that they live. So just to give an example of this, and we're going to get some idea of what the qualification is for these two different paths later. But one time, one of my friends who was living as a monk, he got, he was out in the streets doing the whole Hare Krishna thing and giving out books and whatever to people. And this man came up and confronted him. And he said, hey, look at you. You're just living your life. You're just dancing and giving out free books, and you just have no job, He's just like, and you just eat and you sing and all these things. And he's kind of like coming at him like, look at you. You're just enjoying. You're so renowned. You think you're so renounced, but look, you're just enjoying. And so, he was also saying in one sense, like, I wish I could do that. He's like, living as a monk, I also heard that from people like, oh, I wish I could just give up everything and live in the ashram too. But then when it comes time for that, they want the enjoyment aspect of what it looks like to be the monk, but they don't want the renunciation aspect of what it looks like, which means I have to follow certain principles. Do I wake up at 4 a.m. every day? I have to do at least 2 hours of meditation every day, 2 hours of study every day. So they want the enjoyment part of that path, but they don't have the qualification to actually do it, right? They spend one day in the ashram, they're like, no, it's okay. I'll go back to my 9 to 5. I don't need this enjoyment in my life, right? So they fantasize, but they don't actually have the qualifications to be able to do it, because it requires some level of consciousness to be able to engage like that. Okay, so he's kind of making this distinction here that there's two classes of qualifications needed to realize the absolute truth. All right, next verse. Not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. Yeah, so basically it's saying a person with an impure heart cannot attain steadiness in this jnana path, right? In this path of detachment, stopping all activities. So with the jnana path, you need to have a pure heart to be able to just be renounced and kind of sit in existence. And you say not many people have this, okay? And also you don't attain this stage of renunciation just by merely giving up your external activities, because it's a state of heart, it's a state of consciousness, okay? Yeah, let's see what else. Yeah, so pretty much what he's saying is like, just by restraining yourself from the world, while your mind and senses are still dominated by the desire to enjoy the world, it's not going to do much for you. And Krishna actually speaks against it heavily. He says, what is the point of this? This is called faking it. He says, what is the point of false renunciation? He says, it's just going to be frustration. And we see that happening, with clergy people in all traditions where there's renunciation, where they give up, but then they're secretly, sleeping with people, abusing people, stealing from the church, etc. Because they don't have that. It takes a lot of focus, and it takes a certain type of person to be able to do that. So it's not just by giving up everything one is so renounced, right? Okay, so next verse. Verse 5 says, everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. Okay. So basically, again, what's being said here is that renunciation isn't a solution for enlightenment, because the gunas, remember we gave this term before. Guna just means rope. And one translation of guna means rope. That there's these gunas of prakriti, these ropes of nature, right? Anybody know what they are? The three? Okay, so you got some people, right? It's sattva, rajas, and tamas. Okay, so there's like the goodness rope. And when that rope is tied around you and pulling you, you're in a good mood and a good consciousness. So you do good things in the world. And then there's the, I'll put these in here in case you don't know these terms. But sattva, rajas, and tamas. So sattva is goodness rope. Rajas basically is like the passionate rope. So dominated by the desire for pleasure and prestige, recognition, etc. And it kind of makes you like in a rascal mood. So you do rascal things, right? Then there's the tamas rope. And when you tie that tamas rope and you're pulled by that tamas rope, it's ignorance. And it makes you in a crazy mood. And so you do destructive things, right? You destroy. Your enjoyment is surrounded by destruction of yourself and others, degradation. And those ropes, unless you're enlightened, those ropes are always pulling you in different directions. And Krishna says that those gunas are constantly competing with one another. So sometimes, and this happens to me all the time, where it's like, yeah, like, I just want to be good. I just want to like be, I just want to be in alignment with my higher self. And then also there's that part of me that's like, but just watch murder shows on Netflix, right? And like, they're always like competing for each other. They're like different ropes. I'm like, I could just like do some more breath work tonight. Or I could binge eat some ice cream and watch some murder shows. And, it just really depends. Like, and sometimes I'm just like, the autoplay feature, and then I'm like 5 episodes in, I'm like depressed. I'm like, damn, I didn't even mean for this to happen. I'm just being pulled by the ropes without my knowledge. It wasn't my intention to be 5 episodes in and a pint of ice cream in. It just happened. The ropes pulled me. Anybody have this happen before? Okay. All right, we got some shy people, but yeah, and then in the same token, it's like you can move into the temple or move into the ashram or the monastery to renounce the world and renounce all the bad activities. But wherever you go, there you are. There your mind is. And you can do the same nonsense in a temple that you can outside of a temple. It doesn't make any difference. You do the same nonsense in a temple. So, okay, verse 6. One who restrains the senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. So senses of action, meaning our eyes, ears, nose, mouth, tongue. Those are the indriyas, right? The senses of acquiring knowledge. And there's also the senses of action, the mouth, or the tongue, the hands, the feet, etc. The different things that allow us to interact with the world and grasp the world. So even if you restrain those, but your mind is thinking about it, you are called a pretender, right? You are called a pretender. If you feel like you're renounced before you've actually cut the ropes, you're just cheating, because internally you're still indulging. Internally, you're still attached, right? Okay. Is this making sense so far? It's just false renunciation. You're like, I don't need that anymore. And you're just like thinking about it all day. You're like what kind of renunciation is that? That's not renunciation, right? Just because you don't have it. And I gave you guys the example of the fox with the grapes, right? The grapes that are hanging from the vine. And the fox is trying to jump and eat the grapes over and over, but he's like a little too short and he can't get it. So then he tries like a different jump technique, still doesn't work. He tries to like jump on the tree and like bounce off and get the grapes, still doesn't work. So he says, oh, what are these grapes? He says, actually, I don't even like grapes. He said, so you start to rationalize, like, because you're frustrated in the material world and you're not getting what you desire. So, oh yes, Actually, who needs this? Who needs grapes? Who needs whatever, insert desire here, right? Whenever it becomes fresh in it, all of a sudden you become so renounced. I'm so self-satisfied. I know, but really you're just cheating. You're just frustrated. So you need to change your philosophy a little bit, but still the desire is there somewhere. Okay, so that's what Krishna is saying here. Okay, verse 7. On the other hand, if a sincere person tries to control the senses by the mind and begins karma yoga without attachment, he is by far superior. Okay. So he's saying it's far better to be in the world and try to practice developing a detached mind, right? It's far better to become the person who tries to practice being devoid of results. This means ashakta, who performs the yoga in the form of all the karmas and actions that he does, but he regulates them with his mind, okay? With the intention of realizing the self. Why? Because this yogi, he knows that what is obfuscating me from understanding and experiencing my own Atman is my attachment to the object, temporary objects around me, my engagement and the allurement and my addiction to pleasing what is not me, which is my mind and senses. And so while he's still engaging the mind and senses in the world, he has some knowledge of that, and that allows him to, or her to regulate their activities. So what this could look like in a practical sense is, okay, I know that drinking is bad. Therefore, let me go from 10 drinks a week to 7. And for you, that is like a big renunciation. And then to 4. And then to 1. And you, of course, it's a very gross example, but you have an idea in your mind that I'm addicted to pleasing my ego and my senses in my mind. These are the ways in which I do it. Now let me try to regulate my engagement with those things that puff up my ego and addict my mind. You guys get what I'm saying here? So it's not like a cold turkey renunciation thing, which, by the way, a cold turkey like never works, which is why, because it's fake. You just give it up and then your mind is looking at it, but rather a regulation. While you're also scrubbing the mind through the process of yoga so that the very impetus to engage with such activities decreases. Right? So it's a little artificial in the sense that you have to force some control and go from that 10 drinks to 7 drinks. And that for you feels a little forced. But at the same time, you're doing it in service of the spirit and the Atman. You're doing other activities of bhakti that are scrubbing your heart at the same time. And those two together, you sincerely trying to be better and focused on the soul and in alignment with the soul, he says it's a much better process than just trying to give up this world. Because guess what? Just trying to give up the world and give up all those bad things, it still leaves the heart a filthy place. And it still leaves all of those ropes and strings attached to the mind that want those things, and it's going to pull you in that direction. So what's the use of that? Better to engage and try to regulate a little bit while also performing yoga, while also looking for the soul and the spirit and divinity of things. Does this make sense? It's becoming a little clearer now. So this is the confusion that Arjuna was struggling with. And this is the only way that we can actually develop real renunciation. It's not such a cheaply bought thing to be a renounced person. It takes practice and determination. This is part of the Buddhi Yoga, using the intelligence. Okay. Yeah, so anyways, Krishna is here explaining his preference for this form of yoga rather than just trying to renounce the world artificially. All right, so really this whole first, we didn't read this verse 8. Perform your prescribed duty for doing so is better than not working. One cannot even maintain one's physical body without work. Okay, so it's again putting the same point. But basically, one of the lessons that Krishna is teaching in this verse 1 through 8 is that honesty is the best policy. Being real. You know, Krishna, I see where the ideal is at. I know where my ideal is at. And I know where my current location is. And there's a wide gap between those two things. But I'm going to take a few steps towards you and not try to jump 10 steps prematurely. And I'm going to do it in a spirit of devotion. And I'm going to be real. This is who I am. This is where I'm at. This is what I'm struggling with. I find 10 years into my bhakti journey that I'm having to rediscover the authentic mystical nature of my own spiritual practice that drew me to it in the first place. Or else it just becomes dull and I just chant my japa and chant my rounds in my mantra, just falling asleep, and I just read the books and I do the good things and I check the list off and I'm like, I'm a good spiritualist, but it loses that heart of it. It loses that intimacy and the realness. And now when I pray, it's like, hey, this is what's in my heart. And I don't just pray for the things that I think a good devotee or a good bhakt should pray for, but I'm just like, this is what's in my heart, you know, like there's still some material things I definitely want. Help me out here, you know. And there's also my spiritual aspirations, help me out here too. But this is where I'm at. This is the honesty is the best policy. Instead of trying to be fake. Because then what happens when I'm fake, just like any relationship, you start to be fake with your husband. You start to be fake with your child. You try to be something you're not. It creates distance. It creates inauthentic interaction. It creates a lack of intimacy. And the same thing happens with God. Same thing happens with Krishna. He's like, be real with where you're at. And also strive for the highest goal. The thing with that is, they don't tell you, like one of the mottos in the Hare Krishna movement and the Bhakti movement is chant and be happy. But they don't tell you how much time it takes between the chanting and the being happy part. And how much dedication that takes. And all the different interior redesigning you're going to have to do. Ripping out all the carpets and knocking down the walls and all the stuff. So it takes time. It takes time. Let's see. Okay, so this next section is really verses 9 through 16, where Krishna speaks about this concept of, I'll put it in the chat here, this concept of yajna. Has anyone heard this term before, yajna? Okay. It's not yajna. That's just the English transliteration, but it's said yajna. And it's really how you can think about it in English is Vedic ritual or sacrifice, right? And when we think sacrifice, like when I first heard that, when I joined the Bhakti movement, I was like, man, they're talking about like goat heads and like humans dying on an altar. That's not what this is. This is very different context of sacrifice. Anything else I wanted to say? Yeah. Okay, so let's start reading. Verse 9 onward. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in that way you will always remain free from bondage. In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, be thou happy by this yajna, the sacrifice, because its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation. Okay. So basically in this first verse, verse 9, he's saying that living entities, I am loka, all different living entities are bound by actions, this karma bandhana. I described this karma bandhana to you guys before. How, because of our past conditionings, we're impelled to act in a particular way. By acting in a particular way, we're bound to the laws of nature, which is that we must experience an equal and opposite reaction. And that impels us to act even more. And it just is like a cycle that is like the bug trying to move in the spider web, right? Every action he does is entrapping himself more in the material world, like moving in quicksand. That is that karma bandhana. So all living entities are doing these actions that make them more and more bound because it's motivated by this desire for personal enjoyment, right? But he's saying when you try to use those activities towards transcendence, and towards pleasing divinity, towards pleasing the source from which everything is provided, that web begins to get cut. None of your actions, you become like the spider who can then walk on the web, but not be entrapped in the web. Right? So even though the spider is moving here and there in the web of this world, he's not getting caught in it. Right? But it takes certain qualities, it takes certain qualification to be the spider versus being the fly. Okay. Yeah, so anyways, it's a kind of archaic language here, which is like yagya, the sacrifice was given by God, and that it involves pleasing the gods. But there's a whole science to this. And I'll try my best to explain this yoga science so we can understand it a little bit deeper. Okay, so in Vedic culture and pretty much any culture, I don't want to say any culture, but other cultures like South American religion and South American philosophies, ancient philosophies, they pretty much saw all living entities as personalities. Right? They saw the river as a person. They prayed to Father Sky, Father Sun, Sister Moon. There's many examples of this in all cultures, and some do it more so, and some do it less. But South American cultures did that a lot, where the tree had a spirit, and the frog had a spirit, and the bird had a spirit, and all these different entities had the spirits. And so there's this concept within Vedic culture of devas, which are considered in English to be like demigods. So these are like the controllers of the natural forces of nature. The wind and the rain, the sky, the sun, they're all different devas, okay? And so the science here is that basically when we take from nature, which we are living in a universe, in a creation where every living entity subsists off of harming another living entity. Okay, aside from maybe plants. But every entity is food for another entity. Right, which is kind of far out to think. Like every entity is food of another entity. And when that's the case, you must take from life, which is sacred, in order to survive. And everyone must do that. Must take from something sacred just to have the bare necessity to exist. So when we take from nature, just like any relationship, when you take financially, emotionally, any sort of resource, when you try, you have to also try to give back to make the relationship whole. It's a very simple principle, right? Only small children are allowed to be narcissists. Right? Like every small child will be a narcissist. And that's natural. That's like what it's supposed to be. Everything about me. But when we grow, there becomes a responsibility. And in any culture, the more you grow, the more responsibility comes. You have to give back to the parents, you have to give back to society, etc. And so you're subsisting on others' mercy for so long. Like you think about a human child, how biologically inferior is the human child in the animal kingdom? Like nails can't do anything. The teeth can't there's no teeth. It's just gums in the mouth. can't walk anywhere, just like pudgy flesh, like can we like leave it out in the sun, it'll burn. No protection. There's no protection from anything. And so it's just completely at the mercy of its providers, of the mother and the father for so long. It needs so much care. You leave it alone for a day, 2 days, it could die, right? It can die. So in the same way, we are in one sense so disconnected from nature that there's no responsibility to give back, because when we go to Whole Foods, I just get this box, it's a nice package. And where does my food come from? It comes from the store, you know? But I don't realize my food doesn't come from the store. Also, it's another way that we dissociate from killing animals is by packaging it, removing the blood from it, processing it a particular way. Like, what is a meatloaf? Like ground beef. It's like, how do you equate that with being a loving cow? It's very hard to equate that. So there's this mass, and then they wrap it in styrofoam and plastic wrap or whatever. You just have it. It's all cleaned up. And so there's this massive disconnect. What to speak of the man who stocked the shelf in Whole Foods, the man who put the boxes, who unloaded the boxes from the truck and into Whole Foods, the man who drove the truck from the distributor to Whole Foods, right? The man who built that truck, the people who built the pieces of that truck, the person on the oil rig who got the oil to fill that truck, the person who invented the oil machines to get the oil to fill that truck, to transport the box to Whole Foods so the guy could stock it on the shelf. And you could just keep going back and back and back and in all directions. And we just got it from the store. What to speak of the nature that was taken from, the farmer who grew it, the sunbeams whose love grew it, the water and the rains, the soil, the microbes, the worms, the trillions of little tiny creatures that interacted with it. So yajna is this science of giving back, recognizing divinity through the elements and giving back and making it a complete cycle. Okay. When we don't reciprocate with that cycle, it causes a disruptance. That's why we see like climate change and so many other things happening. Religious destruction, exploitation. You give back, you take without giving back, it creates a massive disturbance and everyone loses. Everyone loses. You think by having more, you're going to get more. By having more, you get less. Right? Okay. So we don't have a ton of time, but just very briefly, I'm going to share that there's 5 yajnas. Okay. One is to the devas. Okay. These are the natural like demigods, the caretakers of the natural elements. Okay. All right. Another way to think about this is like how conservationists and biologists and activists have gotten some success in their endeavors is that they've given certain pieces of land and trees the same status as a human. And that's the way that they've been able to protect certain pieces of land, is by giving it the same rights as a person. And when it's so interesting, right? That personalism is the solution. When we actually see that different living entities are persons, we actually protect them and respect them as a person, or else we see it as a commodity. So in the same way, we are seeing that there are persons, which are the devas, who are responsible for the happenings of nature. And we want to reciprocate instead of just exploit and not just use it as commodity. Okay, another one is called the Rishi Yajna. Rishis just means the sages, right? Saintly people. Bhuta Yajna. This means all the other living entities in nature, recognizing that there's a greater symbiosis. Nara Yajna, which basically means to other human beings. who are playing their part in the societal body, right? Just like imagine if tomorrow, because of disrespect, all plumbers quit their jobs, right? It's like we kind of consider it like not a very Instagrammable job, but it's like, imagine if tomorrow all plumbers and all garbage men just quit. What would happen in the world? Just for a day. Just for a day, if they quit, what would happen? So respecting, everyone's playing their part in the societal body. Every piece of the body is important. Not that I just cut my pinky finger off because, oh, what does it do? It's not so as important as the thumb and the other fingers, but we respect it. And then the last one is called, I don't even know how to pronounce it properly in English, Pitri Yagya, right? So this is like to the forefathers, to your ancestors. Okay. So verse 11 here, the demigods being pleased by sacrifices will also please you, and thus by cooperation between many demigods, prosperity will reign for all. So basically what this is saying, when you respect all the different components of nature and divinity, everyone prospers. When you don't, stuff starts to really suck, okay? Let's see. All right, so let's read a few more verses. Verse 12, in charge of the various necessity of life, the demigods being satisfied by the performance of yajna will supply all necessities to you. But he who enjoys such gifts without offering to the demigods in return is certainly a thief. Right? I forgot, there was this one younger comedian who had a Netflix series or a Netflix movie that he shot entirely in one room by himself in the pandemic. I forgot what this comedian's name was, but one of the songs that he made in this comedy skit was that private property was inherently theft. And I just always thought about that, like this just brought that up, like, wow, people brag about private property, but it's like inherently theft because the land doesn't belong to you. How can one claim ownership over a living entity? How can one claim ownership over any living beings who have their separate existence and their own soul animating their body, right? Okay, next. So yeah, it just says certainly as a thief. I just remember that one. It's inherently theft. The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is first offered for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. All right, so just very briefly, there's all sorts of Judeo-Christian terms being used, but sin in its real essence means that which hurts one's own self. Okay, so any act that hurts one's own self is considered sin, not like something that's arbitrarily defined as good and bad and you're going to get smited by a guy with a beard in heaven if you don't do it, right? That's not the sin that is being said here, like some arbitrary set of rules. It's that which hurts your own existence. That's which hurts your own soul's flourishing. Okay, so basically it's saying that the devotees, the bhaktas, do not hurt their own self because the food that they eat is offered with devotion. And this is a term that we call prasad. Okay, when we take food, prasad literally means mercy. But prasad is what we call food that has been first offered back to divinity. Okay, so personally, when I cook in my kitchen, it's part of Ayurvedic principles, it's part of the Bhakti principles. When I cook, I'm not tasting the food while I cook it. And I'm cooking in the consciousness that God's coming as my guest. What should I cook God today for lunch? Okay, and this is a very special guest. So I want to cook him the best. And what is the best? That which is made with love. Okay, and I offer that with certain mantras and certain prayers and devotion. And Krishna is very simple, very easily pleased. Asutosh. It's another name for Lord Shiva. But Lord Shiva is also very easily angered. So, but Krishna is very easily pleased and not very easily angered. So he takes a little fruit, little flower, little water, a leaf. If you offer that with love, Krishna says he'll accept it. It's so simple. Bhakti is so simple, a 2-year-old can do it, right? So when we do that, we are then allowing that food to be transcendentalized, because we're offering it with love and affection back to the source from which it came for the enjoyment of the source itself, right? And when we do that, we take out the whole karma bandhana aspect that, well, even if I'm vegetarian, I'm killing things. It's not totally non-violent. Right? I'm vegetarian. Who cares if you're vegetarian? Pigeons are vegetarian. Monkeys vegetarian. It's not super impressive. There's tons of animals that are vegetarian, right? But what we want to do is go a step further than that and offer all of it back, because all of it's creating harm, no matter what it is. But to the extent we can reduce the harm, we want to do that. To the extent we can offer it with love and devotion back to the source, we want to do that. So that's what this verse here is saying. Okay, now there's so much more to say, but just little one-on-one. All living bodies subsist on food grains, which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by the performance of yajna, and yajna is born of prescribed duties. So this is the equation here that's being given. One of my gurus, he shares that there's three levels of food, 3 levels of eating food. Okay, the food that is gotten from the restaurant or the fast food only pleases the sensual nature, right? The senses. Food that's gotten from a restaurant is sensual. Food that is cooked at home is sensual and it's emotional, right? Like that food cooked by your mother or by a loved one. There's emotion put into that. You know, I hope that he loves it. I hope it comes out good. Hope that it nourishes my boy. I hope that nourishes my daughter. It's sensual, meaning it's tasty and it's for the senses, and it's emotional. Now, prasad, which is the science of offering the food back to a divinity, is sensual, it's emotional, and it's spiritual. I remember when I first started eating prasad, I literally thought it was like, I mean, I was also a stoner at this time, so maybe that's part of it. But I thought that it was like laced with something. I was like, how is this so good? And it's like, I was like laughing while eating this like cupcakes and like all this like crazy vegetarian food that I was like, wow, like this is so good. And like, I was like laughing while I was eating it. I was like, I've never had something like this. It was like cooked with so much love and infused with so much goodness that I could just feel it. And I wasn't used to that. I was used to, you know, refried beans from a can or eating at the restaurant, having some Domino's pizza delivered, you know, whatever it is. And like this food was so categorically different that I was like crying of laughter while eating it. Of course, probably looking like a little cray cray, but I was like, man, this is like, you know, another level. And so that is what the power of this prasad is that even by feasting, one can become transcendentalizing their life. You can make spiritual advancement by feasting. I was like, this is my kind of religion. All right, here we go. Dancing and chanting and feasting. I was like, all right, this is like a little more my speed than that Sunday service. Anyways, no shade here. Okay, just very briefly, we're almost at our time, but I want to describe this yajna. This science of sacrifice, that we destroy the integrity of a relationship when we don't give back. We destroy the integrity of a relationship when we don't give back, and we're all interrelated. And when the integrity is lost, then it causes more and more unwholesome actions to be done, right? Like once one person in a room starts lying about something and they get the upper hand because they're lying, then everyone else is kind of prompted and pushed to lie and act out of accordance. Like when someone cheats in a game and they get the upper hand through cheating, and all of a sudden, everyone else, it's like you either be cheated or you be the cheater. but we want to act outside of the material system of either being the cheater or the cheated. We want to act in a transcendent, godly way. So let's see. How do I want to describe that? 1 second. Okay, let's read the next verse first, and then I'll give you the full description. Regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from God. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. So this verse 14 and 15 go together, and I'm going to give you the real quick breakdown of it. So from God, Krishna, Jehovah, Yahweh, Buddha, Allah, whatever you want to call your name that you like, from divinity comes Vedas. Vedas means knowledge. Knowledge of what? Knowledge of spirit, knowledge of matter, astrology, yoga, Ayurveda, martial arts, etc., etc. From knowledge comes duty, right? Last class I said knowledge is not free. When you know something, you are then obliged to act according to what you know. And there are worse consequences if you act out of accordance with what you know than if you never were to know that at all. Just like when you grow up and you learn the law, there are heavier punishments now that you can be charged as an adult who knows the law than when you broke the law as an 8-year-old and you stole a candy bar from the store. So from knowledge comes duty. From duty, you have to have some sort of sacrifice in your duty. There has to be sacrifice. That's part of duty. That's part of love. That there's some sort of sacrifice, giving of oneself for a higher purpose, giving up a lower nature enjoyment for a higher ideal, right? From that comes abundance in nature, which here is equated as rains because water is life, right? Water sustains life. But it also includes all the other elements, fire, earth, air, ether, etc. From those rains comes food, right? Without rain, there's no food. And from food, humans are nourished. And then the cycle starts again, right? From humans, it goes back to duty and dharma. And it's this cycle. It's this cycle. Okay? So from God comes Vedas, from Vedas comes knowledge, from knowledge comes duty, from duty comes sacrifice, from sacrifice comes rain, from rain comes food, and then from foods, humans are nourished, and then humans have to act in duty again, and it keeps the cycle going. One of the very interesting things I'll wrap up in the next few minutes is when I was living as a monk in the eco-village in India, the Govardhan eco-village, I was given a few research projects to do because I have degrees in biology, and then I also have Ayurveda studies. So they're having me look at all these old Ayurveda manuscripts about plants and doing all these, making courses for them, basically, that combine biology and ecological studies with Ayurveda. And one of the very interesting things that I found on my own, and I'm sure, maybe other people have found it too, is I looked at the countries that have the most exploitation of Earth's resources, who are causing the most harm to the Earth as a whole. I looked at those top 10 countries. And to my surprise, it was very interesting to find those same top 10 countries that were exploiting the Earth were the top 10 countries for most natural disasters. And it said that where there's pious people, the land becomes pious. The land becomes rich and fertile. So I've experienced this too in my travels, backpacking through South America and whatever. The most humble people who are just simple and grateful and godly. And then they're living in this tropical wonderland of papayas and mangoes and fruits, and just fruits popping out of every corner. And everything's lush, and coffee and everything. And when we see where there's the most violence and harm, those lands are becoming barren. Look at the Middle East, regimes exploiting their people. Look at Los Angeles. It's a desert. It's all dried up. The fires destroying the millionaires' homes. The elements strike back. So just ending here, that all of our sustenance comes from grace. And when we are living with a real sense of culture, we're able to see that. When we live without a sense of spiritual culture, we're entitled. We're entitled, we're blind to the relationships that exist and sustain us, that everything's coming through mercy and grace. And that justifies our grabs for power and our exploitation and our grabs for control, and the cycle continues. So let this be our meditation and our prayer. Even if you just do it once this week before you eat a meal, think about the trillion people that were involved just to bring this bowl of soup on your table. I always think that fruits are God's way of smiling. Like, I'm like, only God could invent this stuff, man. Like, friggin', like just in my neighborhood, there's persimmons, there's pineapple, there's oranges, lemons, limes, there's artichokes growing, there's fig trees, there's plums, there's grapes, there's apple trees, just in my neighborhood, just right here. And they're all just falling off the trees, and the neighbors pick them and they put them in a box in their yard and they say free lemons, free figs, free. It's just happening. Nature gives more than we give. And so what a shame when nature starts to recede. It really means that we must be exploiting a lot. Because all you need to put in is a little bit of reciprocation and nature will give 10 times more. So if nature is receding and withholding, imagine how much we must be taking. And for all exploiting our mother, just taking from our mother, torturing our mother. Okay, let's end there. Any questions, comments, reflections? If you have to leave right at this moment, please do. If you have anything to share.
I just love what you said about all of our sustenance comes from nature. I just found that to be like so beautiful, and the disconnection from nature is something, I mean, I'm sure all of us think about it a lot. I think about it just, it's so simple. It just seems like the solution is so simple. Just stop what we're doing and, you know, pay attention to how we're just pillaging and taking and taking and taking and taking. And of course, nature is responding. And of course, she's mad, like she's pissed. And like, what does it take to wake up on a mass scale? You know, as long as capitalism keeps, you know, digging its heels into the earth, literally. I mean, it's kind of a gloomy thought, but it's beautiful how you know, what you say, it's true. You know, sustenance is grace.
Yeah, yeah. I think when it comes to these things, my personal conviction is that I can't really control anything other than myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually by transforming myself, that's one of the most powerful things I can do for society, because it's the only thing I have real control over. Or else I haven't transformed myself and I'm calling out all the people who haven't also transformed themselves. But my heart's still filthy. And I haven't really done the deep work. And now I'm just shouting from my soapbox and nothing's happening. I just become frustrated and resentful and filled with hatred, the same as the people who are exploiting the earth are. There's a saying in the Vedas that basically what you meditate on, you become. And that it gives the example, which is a kind of far out example, but that there's a worm in a tree and the wasp is trying to attack the worm in the tree, and he's so fearful thinking of that wasp that he becomes a wasp in his next life. And so I think that these kind of generational things are happening too. My own personal conviction is, yeah, people who were white supremacists, next life get born as slaves, and it just keeps going around. It keeps going around. You get born as what you meditate on. And if you meditate on hatred on something, you get born as that thing. And it just perpetuates because hate makes more hate. So yeah, I find that it's overwhelming to take the world's problems on my shoulders. Like, who am I to take the world's problems on my shoulders? I'm like, I got enough problems myself. I need to work on my own heart. And from that, I can carefully craft my inner garden and grow something delightful that then others can come take the harvest and the bounty of. But first I have to make that inner garden lush and overflowing so I can actually do it. Or else it's just more resentful, barren land, scorching other people, burning other people. Yeah. Thank you for your heart clarity. Anybody else? Oh, Mike.
Yeah. I love what you just said about the inner garden, because I was just gonna share how everything links together. How we started speaking about not being pretenders, right? And finding that balance between dedication and renunciation and devotion, and being honest about it. So if we take all of that same philosophy, not only for spiritual life, but for life on this planet, it's all the same. It's devotion and dedication and honesty towards the planet and towards who we are and the roles that we play while we're here, as a living entity, as a spiritual soul, as a part of this beautiful community. It takes work and honesty, a lot of honesty. Like you said, we need to be honest with who we are, what we're doing.
It just reminds me of that I can only see the faults that I myself possess. The reason I can see faults in other things is because I myself possess them. If I didn't have them, I wouldn't see them. They wouldn't stand out to me. Like when someone's like egotistical, I'm like, oh, look at them, so egotistic. But it's because I have that within me that I'm triggered by that, and I even reflect it as me, recognize it, right? But one who's perfected, they don't see that. One who's at the highest stage, which is this kind of a very esoteric tangent, but one who's at the highest stage of bhakti and uttama bhakti, they see everyone as a lover of God because they see the soul. And so then they're seeing the people drinking and watching the movies and whatever, and there's, oh my God, look at how advanced these people are. They can taste Krishna even in their bottle of wine, and they can feel Krishna's grace even in their movies. He said they're much more advanced than me. Of course, it's the highest level of advancement and devotion that we can't imitate. But the principle still stands that when I see faults with others, it's because I have faults in myself. And so we can always turn that light of judgment into the light of introspection. And be like, so when you were saying, oh man, we all got work to do, I'm like, ugh. Yeah, it's so easy to just point that light on other people. But the only reason I'm seeing the fault is because I possess it. It's because I possess it. So anybody last thing? I saw somebody unmuted.
So yeah, thank you for this session. And I think so just down in the evening, I was kind of questioning myself that what I was on in my 20s and what I'm doing in my 30s. But then as you said, correct, like you get those answers from the nature of itself, like from the things which is going around you. And you yourself need to pause for a second and think about it, that what are you doing? Like, why are you doing? Like, that self-assessment, I think so nobody else can do it. It's just you who can do it.
Yeah.
And another thing I
Unfortunately.
really, yeah. And then another thing I really like about you is, as you said, prasad, correct? Like, that's something, at least I'm Indian, so I know like how things go, and they're very traditional. And every morning I wake up, I open my temple, I kind of offer the water and like prasad to Krishna. And then I don't know, I drink water every day, like my whole bottle. But then that little silver pot in which the water which I've offered to God, it just has something separate. Like it just feels very, I don't know, it's very sacred, like I feel like, okay, my day is going to be okay with that. Like, it's very sacred. Like, I offer fruits, I offer dry fruits, but then I just feel that experience of just offering that to Krishna and then eating that by yourself. I feel, okay, this what, like, I started my day on a good note.
Yeah,
But yeah, that experience, like, it's just amazing.
totally. Totally. Yeah, we need holy things.
Yeah,
And
I'll
it's
show you actually.
oh, beautiful. Little tiny temple.
That's my Krishna.
Very cute. Just to
Yeah.
let you all know, this is our first session in the month of Kartik, which is a lunar month from this past full moon to the next full moon. So we're only a few days in, but it's this very, very holy and sacred month where anything that you do is multiplied times 10,000 spiritually. And so my reflection here, which is right on these sticky notes in my desk, my little reflections in front of me is, one says, I want you to guide me in everything at all times. I want you to guide me in everything at all times. And then the other is a list of questions. What do I want? What is my prayer? What is this month of Kartik for? What is the powerful magic for me to experience in Kartik? Because Kartik is like this moon, when you go outside and you experience the light of the full moon, it's so cooling to the heart and cooling to the mind. And this whole month is like that, millions of moons like that for the soul. And that the grace of Devi, of Sri Radha, of Krishna's divine feminine consort, is like looking for an excuse to give buckets and showers of her love into your life. Like the divine goddess, divine feminine, she's like looking for an excuse. She's like, just give me an inch of room to do my work. Give me an excuse. And so in this month, we try to commit to some extra little thing that we do on a regular basis for our spiritual practice. And we ask for that grace. And when I pray, if I don't have anything to begin with, because prayer is something that's bestowed. You can pray, you can, but real prayer is when you enter that sanctum sanctorum, that inner chamber of the heart, where that magic happens, and where there's like that alchemy process, that alchemical process of everything begins, and your life begins to turn to gold in your consciousness. And sometimes you need to start your prayer by praying to be able to pray. So sometimes I start by just praying, please allow me to pray. Please allow me to know how to pray. Please allow me to enter that sanctum sanctorum with prayer. Please. And from that, it's like this mystic door, which we can experience our own self and be met with the goddess's grace, be met with Sri Radha's grace and Krishna's grace in your life, whatever that looks like for you. So I encourage you all to just take advantage of this month and make some sort of small commitment, even if it's just 5 minutes a week. Because it said you make one step towards Krishna, he takes 10,000 towards you. So you just need to make a little step. And Krishna wants to give you love way more than you want to experience it. And so you just have to think about that God, Krishna, Radha wants your whole life to be flooded with magic and ecstasy and love way more than you do. They have to give them some room to do their magic. And that's what that chamber of prayer is for. That's what that inner space is for. So anyways, wanted to throw that in there. That I hope we can all do that this month. And that you guys are allowing me to do that in a small way with you guys. So thank you guys. We're a bit over time, but whatever. I didn't make no promise. So I will see you guys next Thursday. I'll probably be in New York. I might change the time to be 3 hours earlier to 6 p.m. Eastern time so that I can do my thing at the Bhakti Samaya Kirtan. So love you guys. Have a beautiful week. Hariom Tat Sat. Thank you.